Hello and welcome to the EduTalk Diabetes series hosted by EZ Diabetes Dry Skin Lotion and Creams, Biotone, and diabetes health and wellness experts. With the daily challenges of diabetes and the growing interest in health and wellness strategies, the EduTalk Diabetes series supports building your wellness community by connecting you with diabetes health experts who share their knowledge and expertise on topics of concern to provide you tools and resources to support and manage a healthy lifestyle. Today's expert is Dale Alexander, PhD and LMT, who has specialized in resolving chronic somatic problems since 1980. He's an author of The Inside Out Paradigm and published over 100 articles for Massage Today. Dale was named the 2016 Continuing Education Provider of the Year with the Alliance for Massage Therapy Education, and in 2023, he was inducted into the Massage Therapy Hall of Fame through the World Massage Festival. Let's listen and learn as Dale outlines diabetes is not just something that pops up out of nowhere. It has a progression, a theorized evolutionary origin, including the crucial importance of bile and pancreatic enzymes and juices for absorbing nutrition, recognizing progression and understanding how crucial exercise and movement is so important toward prevention and management of diabetes. I know Dale has a lot to get to tonight. Dale, welcome. Thank you again for joining us and sharing your information. Dale has been a past presenter with EduTalks. I'm going to exit, and feel free to chat questions again. Dale will answer at the end. I'll see you on the other side, Dale. It's all yours.
Okay. Thank you so much, Danielle. Gosh, there we go. The screen. This is our third show together, Danielle. We have had some fun and we will have more tonight. Thank you all who have joined, and we hope to cover a number of things: how bodywork may assist those with diabetes, understanding the anatomy that's involved in all of this, and even some historical perspective that might be of great interest. So I want to acknowledge, I'm not moving forward here. We had it working before. I do apologize. Let's try it again. Okay. Okay. Maybe there we go. Now we have it. Can you see me on the other side, folks?
Dale,
Yes.
don't forget to hit the green share button before you pull up your PowerPoint.
Can you see my PowerPoint now?
No, you need to hit the green share button.
Oh, okay. I apologize. There we go. Let's try it again. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So, from the current slide, there we go. Okay. I do want to acknowledge the 7 years that I spent at the Upledger Institute studying with Dr. John, Dr. Baral, the developer of visceral manipulation, and Dr. Richard McDonald, who was a master of biomechanics. He and I wrote the first workbook for the muscle energy technique, and I met some enduring collaborators and friends, Lansing Barrett Gresham and also Michael Shea. Michael Shea, kudos to you for last month's show on diabetes here with Danielle. And folks, please go back and view that one. He did a superb job on metabolic disorders. Now, we want to create evolutionary context for how diabetes may have assisted our species' survival through a rapid period of climate change. This comes from a book called Survival of the Sickest, which is an interesting title, isn't it? It describes many additional challenges that our species faced and their evolutionary echoes, how they may be affecting our present time health and wellness. This notion of evolutionary echoes takes on more and more meaning for me. Now, in 6 sentences, this is the body of evolutionary genetics. Organic life began approximately 3.5 billion years ago. I choose to believe there was a divine spark to this initiation. Evolution occurs in all living organisms, and they must adapt to changing environmental pressures. All species must do one thing: survive long enough to reproduce. The real kicker is somewhere in your genetic code is the tale of every plague, every predator, every parasite, every mutation, and planetary upheaval that our ancestors managed to survive. All is written within this code. However, it does not determine your life. Sure, it shapes it. Certainly, our early childhood is hugely influenced by those who raise us, care for us, the environment itself. But the choices we make on a daily basis, especially type 2 diabetes, can influence how far the progression goes and to what extent it rules our life. In science, we oftentimes come back to nature versus the nurture controversy, and it frames our inquiry into humanity's ancient and present time history. We create theories that have some evidentiary facts, then we argue about them until the cows come home. The theory presented tonight is that diabetes may have especially helped our Northern European ancestors to survive the sudden cold of the last ice age, called the Younger Dryas, named after the Arctic wildflower that you see here about 13,000 years ago. The previous Pleistocene ice sheets had receded, opening Northern Europe to settlement by our Homo sapiens ancestors. This period lasted about 1,500 years. The onset of the Younger Dryas was a blink in geologic time of just 100 years and is believed to have persisted for 1,300 years. The onset challenged every aspect of survival, not the least of which was bitter cold. Maybe many or maybe even most died, yet obviously some survived. How might this have been possible? In today's language, we would say epigenetics. At the time that Dr. Mollem wrote this book, he described the switching on and off of certain genes. That is what epigenetics as a word means. Within the DNA code, so the switching on or off within the code that allowed adaptation at that time, reproduction, and thus survival of the species. Dr. Mollem's book describes many fascinating postulations of how or why these latent capacities may have originated or were expressed. His list is rather intricate, so I will cut to the chase. In the face of extreme cold, elevated blood sugar functions like antifreeze. When you live in extreme cold, our bodies will actually even now begin to develop some degree of brown fat, which when burned produces heat. The need to urinate frequently, so often associated with diabetes, is considered to be an offloading of water that could freeze. And in earlier animals, fibrogen is often there to repair ice damage to frozen tissues. This may have been true for us as well. Many associations between diabetes, blood sugar, water, and cold are described by Dr. Mollem. He states that type 2 diabetes has a stronger genetic and lifestyle component than type 1. So we are talking more about type 2 in this particular talk. Now, a participant in one of my courses, the Inside Out Paradigm courses, had given me this book, and immediately as I read this particular chapter on how sugar influences our health in so many different ways, this picture by Dr. Frank Netter of the pancreato, meaning pancreas, and biliary, liver gallbladder systems, and the anomalies that they each have, and variations is a more commonplace word for the word anomaly. And there are 6 different aspects and types, shapes, and internal functions. Here we see then in 8 different elements affecting mostly the ductal system within the pancreas. And again, there are 11 in the gallbladder. So what this inferred to me is that Mother Nature had to experiment. And this only makes sense. Our ancestors needed to derive nutrition from almost anything ingested in order to survive. We know that bile from the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and the pancreatic juices and enzymes are essential ingredients to complete digestion and thereby the absorption of nutrients within the small intestine. The body stores any excess as fat, which is really good if you're in an ice age. You've got a portable pantry and some insulation. How can massage and body work help? Well, diabetes challenges us to improve our understanding of how the body really works. And I'd like you just to consider this as a premise. Restriction of any free-flowing fluid is how and where most organic dysfunctions begin, especially within our organ systems. We would call this congestion and congestion. I'm looking for my cursor. There it is. Congestion is what provokes the inflammatory cycles. Hans Selye really helped me to understand that inflammation exists to move that which is stuck. And I'm going to be emphasizing a technique called clearing the common bile duct. It is an essential skill, easily learned, and I will offer a demonstration of it. The other aspect that we bring to our tables each and every time is a quality of compassionate presence, and also, as we gain more understanding, the ability to encourage people to seek out medical assistance. People trust us because they allow us to touch them. That's really the bottom line. We don't have any authority. They simply trust our caring. Now, one of my clients recently turned me on to a nutrition author by the name of T.C. Hale, who has trademarked himself as a bio-individuality coach. He's actually pretty doggone good, and he has many, many free videos that you can look up. And he helped me to understand that the chemical bookends of digestion and nutrient absorption really involve the mixing of stomach acid and the alkalizing effect of bile stored in the gallbladder and the bicarbonate solutions from the pancreas. Using his language, this creates a sizzle that busts apart the nutrients, vitamins, and minerals. The most common problems are not enough stomach acid and when the bile becomes too thick and sticky to flow correctly. We're going to follow down the bile side mostly. You can go to his videos to understand what may be done if there's not enough stomach acid. But we've all had GI problems of one time or another, or sometimes chronically so. And his premise is these are all symptoms of not breaking down food as naturally designed. One of the key elements that I picked up from him, I had read it, I had seen it, but I didn't quite get it until I heard him speak it. And that is the liver sends its toxins into bile. Thus, the natural detoxification pathway via excretion through our large intestine is oftentimes subverted, and we will explain how that works as we move forward. Diabetics are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop sludge, the thick and sticky elements of bile, or you add a little calcium, you get gravel, or you add more calcium and you get gallstones that may block the sphincter of Oddi, which we'll see in the next slide. This was named after Rogero Oddi in 1887. Again, the liver dumps many of its toxins into bile, and gallstones, eventually provoke inflammation, often infection and pain, and maybe even cancer. We need to comprehend that when one has diabetes, they're oftentimes dealing with recurring states of pancreatitis and or gallbladder troubles. And in fact, I had a client who came to me, he had been a rodeo star, turned into a salesman in his middle years, and he thought for sure he had kidney stones, but all the tests were done. They didn't think that was the problem. As I worked with him, I kept coming back to the gallbladder and the common bile duct. And eventually I said, I think you need to go back to your physician. And he actually did have, and the only person that I'm aware of that ever was diagnosed with gallbladder cancer. On the other side of it, diabetes, those who have diabetes are challenged with the buildup of fat, the so-called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is really overtaking many, many of us. And or for those who drink too much alcohol, cirrhosis is the other aspect of that teeter-totter. But the long and short of it is the common bile duct blockage or congestion may incite inflammation in either the liver, the pancreas, or the gallbladder. So let's look. I blew this picture up so you could really see it. This is the gallbladder that stores the bile. And very often stones will develop here and they never get out to get through the ducts. Okay. But sometimes smaller ones do, and they can occlude this. I actually had passed a stone one time and it wasn't fun. I hear it's not as bad as kidney stones, so I hope I'm not challenged with that as well. But here's the common bile duct, and down here is actually the sphincter of Oddi. Now, for those of you who can see, there's also a little flange here called the ampulla of Vader, and that means flask in Latin. But this common bile duct means that the pancreatic juices and the bile go through the same opening into this, the small intestine. So, what happens if these fluids, which act as detergents, are prevented from flowing into the small intestine due to thickened or sticky bile? So, and this is a question that occurred to me 25 years ago. Could the progression of diabetes be partly due to a plumbing problem? A plumbing problem that you and I, as LMTs, can help people with. So, then I got another piece of the puzzle through a client who became a friend who was an emergency room physician, and he went to get his CEs as an emergency room physician. And he came back and he was backing me up as I was writing the first set of series about the gallbladder troubles, because in the 90s I had a slew of them. And I began to just begin to understand how this had a systemic effect on almost all chronic somatic dysfunction. And he said the first thing out of the GI section's mouth was that 70% of people over 70 will generally have gallstones. And I said, Jake, if I understand it correctly, when you go to a sections meeting, the first thing out of their mouth is what they want you to remember. Is that true? He said, yes. And I said, he's also trying to help you prioritize the most likely source of a person's problem. Because as an ER doc, you got to think quick. He says, you got it. So that added an understanding and an importance for all of what I'm saying tonight. So let's understand how gallstones are formed. They're a combination of cholesterol, bilirubin, and bile salts that typically combine to form the thick and sticky sludge, gravel, and varying sizes of gallstones. I had one surgeon actually show me one that was as big as a baseball that he had taken out of someone. Now, any of these can partially block the sphincter of Oddi, as was suggested before. But what happens to the pancreatic juices and enzymes that back up into the pancreas? Might they contribute to chronic inflammation? Might they even affect the islets of Langerhans, reducing insulin production or its availability? Now, there have been so many good shows, and the fulcrum is does the body have enough insulin? And on the other end, can the cells let it in? That's called insulin resistance. We're focusing more on the side of making sure that the duct is open so the insulin can be utilized by the body. Insulin resistance is a topic I will lead to others. Now, COVID-19 really did a number on us, but it also taught us a lot. And that is in was encompassed in the word comorbidities. So there were 1.4 million deaths. I looked it up today. They were not all cardiopulmonary deaths, But of the people who died for that reason from COVID-19, there almost a third of them had undiagnosed high blood pressure, diabetes, and or coronary artery disease, kidney or lung diseases. What we must understand, need to truly understand, is all of these progress silently. So, what might be early warning signs when we are working with somebody, even in a relaxing massage? We're kind of the new bartenders, where people tell us just about anything and everything that's going on in their lives. They also do this with beauticians and barbers. But if somebody mentions something about excessive thirst, the frequent need to go to the bathroom, the unintended weight loss, slow wound healing, or unexplained fatigue, then we might want to embody something for them and only say it if it's true. Otherwise, cite that you heard me say it. And that is that, a fasting A1C blood test on a yearly basis is usually recommended to people between 45 and 65 and older. This is how you stay ahead, folks, because if you get behind, you don't know how far that can lead, how fast that can lead to other troubles. You can also ask about a person's family history. I had someone just yesterday. I asked them if anybody in their family had diabetes, and they said both their mother and their sister. And in the statistics of any genetic predisposition, that gives them at least a 50% chance. We all know that early detection leads to better outcomes and improved quality of life. And folks, that is the business we're in, the quality of life business. I think of what I do as a calling. I'm sure many of you do as well. But people have no defense when we make a simple recommendation because they know we care about them. So I've blown this up even further. Again, I want you just to get a feel for the stippled lines here means that the duodenum is on top of the common bile duct. Now, you can get an inflammatory situation in the duodenum as well, okay? But your three primary elements are the liver, gallbladder, and the pancreas. And in the ordinary way that things are organized, the inferior vena cava and its portal vein are behind all three, as is the aorta. The liver sits squarely on top, as does the gallbladder, on top of the inferior vena cava and its portal vein. And we must understand that when inflamed, this can reduce the rate and volume of the fluids from the venous and lymphatic vessels returning to the heart-lung complex. Think of this as a pinched hose effect. Liver and gallbladder also sit on top of the confluence of the lymph trunks and goes on up. This is the thoracic duct. Notice how it crosses sides between ribs 3 and 5, and then wraps around to dump into the left subclavian vein. All too often, it's forgotten that proteins that are too big for veins to transport go through the lymph system, and that what they carry is essential to renourishing our blood in order to maintain proper pH, fluid balance, and support for immune function. Dean Juan in 1987, I had the pleasure of actually hear him tell this story. He likened the diaphragm to the Mason-Dixon line, with the agricultural South sending its raw materials back to the industrial North to replenish and reoxygenate our blood. It was a really wonderful analog that was helpful. So another aspect is we need to understand that old blood needs to move out in order for renourished blood to find its way to tissues that need it the most. Of course, this relates then to understanding that venous and lymphatic vessels contain, again, waste products and toxins. If we don't keep the river running, then congestion builds and builds, and this is what most often incites the inflammatory process and pain. Again, Dr. Hans Selye, the father of the stress concept, suggested that inflammation was Mother Nature's moo for tissue repair. And that when inflamed, the vessels get bigger and pushing against the low pressure inferior vena cava, the portal vein, and the confluence of the lymph trunks. And we can help all of this by clearing the common bile duct. You're going to see a video I'm going to voice over because my voice didn't come through well enough. So I will describe it as we go along. The purpose is for you to see how simple of a technique it really is. How do you know if there's been a therapeutic effect? There is a shift in tissue texture where something becomes less dense and more pliable. And let's see if I can get to this. This is where the thing is in my way. And here we go. Okay, my dear friend Marco is my model here. Marco does have diabetes. His son is our camera person. Initially, I'm orienting to the costal cartilages, then to the rectus abdominis on each side. We're going to be working on the right-hand side. My thumb's in the way of it. I'm going to have him lift his head because if you have any question about where that edge is, do that. Putting your fingers together, as I just demonstrated, is how I use my fingers as a tool. I depress softly but firmly until the first hint of resistance, and then I pull downward or caudally. Now notice this has no imagination that this could be a stroke. This is something where you're milking the tube. And actually in Rolfing, the term thixotrophy, where you're shifting the actual molecular structure of something from more solid to more gel-like. And that is what we're doing with the bile. And as we get closer to the belly button, that's where the sphincter of Oddi is. This is where the pancreatic enzymes and juices and the bile go into the small intestine. Now, notice I'm drawing a smiley face, and you're going to be stretching the duodenum away from the pancreas. I have observed over all these years since studying with Dr. Barral what he suggested, and that was don't mess with the pancreas, but you can stretch it. So we need to get to the next slide. There we go. Okay, and this slide actually comes from a doctor who was a renal specialist, a kidney specialist. And I just got lucky and was able to help his wife, who was such a exercise enthusiast. And she started having pains that nobody could figure out where they were coming from. And my hands are a lot smarter than I am, and they kept being drawn back to her heart. And so I suggested to her, how about going to see a female cardiologist? Because even at that time, this was in the mid 2000s, it was clear in the literature, nobody really had an answer for it, but women's heart troubles have different elements to them. And in the Freeing the Heart edu-talk that I did with Danielle, I go into that more specifically. But the Dr. John was so thankful, he just laid this out for me. He said our progenitors died from three basic causes: trauma, famine, and fluid loss. And of course, boy, it was obvious. No wonder we're good at adhesion and scar tissue repair. No wonder we have fat reserves. We build them quickly and they resist being lost. And the retention of fluids, which doesn't seem to have an advantage in today's world. These are all evolutionary echoes. The next thing he shared with me helped me to put together what had really been missing and helped me to understand the importance of the viscera in general. And that is they only have 25% of the sensory neurons that the musculoskeletal system and the skin have together, and our filter organs inside their sacs and capsules, they have none. Liver, kidneys, and lungs, they have none. As a result, as we age, we don't really directly feel the diminishing capacity of their degeneration or progression into disease states. Okay, so it's not going forward. We'll go backward. Oh boy. Ready. All right. Okay. So within general medicine, viscerosomatic reflexes and spinal correspondences are usually eschewed, but for the liver and the pancreas, they are known and they are included. And here, T7 through T10, just think of a person's back as you're working with them. If they have a splinting into that area, they may have liver or gallbladder troubles. And if they come in with right shoulder problems or wrapping around pains into this area, then they may have real troubles. This is the communication system because everything is connected to everything through the fascial matrix, nerves, and blood. So when people have chronic somatic problems, these very often relate back to GI troubles, subclinical infections, echoes of previous traumatic events, or the beginnings of disease progressions, including, unfortunately, cancer. Here we see the viscerosomatic reflex areas for the pancreas. And here it's T5 through 9. So there's a crossover between them. And this is a great picture of actually the pancreas. And the pancreas is anchored over on the left side. That's why it tends to affect the left shoulder and left clavicle, the low back, and the left hip. I have served hundreds of people who did not understand that they probably needed to see a doctor. This discharge into the spine and the somatic structures is what I theorize the body tries to distribute its strain. And we need to be aware of this as people who are with them and become dedicated to their becoming part of their early detection team. And some of you perhaps are old enough to remember the phrase, the canary in the coal mine, where the coal miners would carry the canaries into the mine. And when they stopped singing, they knew that carbon monoxide or other toxic gases were building up and they got out. Okay, I'm going to be going over some of the other major elements of how we can help people with diabetes, which, in all honesty, is the same way you help people who have any chronic dysfunction. But Dr. Baral gets all the credit for this. In 1986, he rocked my world when he said that the pressure within the thoracic cavity needs to be less than that of the abdominal pelvic cavity and also of the cranial cavity. You can't really have normal systemic circulation without this. So this led to the development of inducing pressure differentials as a core skill set. And you will learn these within the courses that I teach. Our real mantra needs to be keep the neurovascular river running smoothly. Another relationship that has grown on me is an understanding of what I think of as an Oreo cookie. The heart being the wafer, the diaphragm being the cream, and then the liver on the bottom being the other wafer. Now, in actuality, the heart and diaphragm begin at C2 in their embryology and descend through the chest cavity to its resting place at between ribs 5 and 6. What most people don't really realize is the liver hangs by 4 different ligaments to the diaphragm. So, in a sense, this is where the major actions are happening, especially when we think about blood and lymph getting back to the heart and lungs. This is not taught in regular massage training because this has not been fully understood or articulated. Now, of course, any of you who are Trekkies out there, space, the final frontier, that's what our bodies need. They need space, specifically to slide and glide. This is a phrase lifting from craniosacral therapy, and particularly the sliding and gliding of the sacs and tubes. The heart and the lungs are both double bagged. The esophagus and the blood vessels, these are all tubes. And we need to help facilitate the movement of all of these things. When we enhance systemic circulation, we improve diabetic management. And by the way, this is the inferior vena cava, bringing back the venous fluid to the tricuspid valve, then on to the pulmonic valve that sends it to the lungs, then back to the heart, and then out to the rest of the body. To give them more room is to help them do their job more efficiently. Now, this is the superior vena cava, and here's the inferior vena cava. Now, or let me begin slightly different. I had a client come to me in the mid 80s, and she said, my inferior vena cava doesn't work. And I went, okay, I'll bite. How does blood get back to your heart? And she said, by the azygous and the hemiazygous system. And I went, that's new for me. I'm going to have to look that up. And folks, when people come in with things you don't know, just say you don't, and you'll look it up. But you can probably look it up on your phone today and find out within 5 minutes, and they don't mind waiting. Okay. But how is it that nature would have created this collateral structure? Well, it has a job of its own. It facilitates draining the body wall and contributes to the drainage of the arms and legs. However, it can, especially in the third trimester of pregnancy, or if the liver and or inflammation of the gallbladder or pancreas are enough, then the venous system has a backup where it sends blood up into the superior vena cava. And another aspect of this particular slide that I'd like you to walk away with is that normally, under normal circumstances, the blood from the left side has to cross the midline to get to the right side. Everything where the action is on the right side in terms of getting blood back to the heart and lungs. And if that weren't enough, nature has created even a secondary backup system. This is called the thoracoepigastric veins on either side. I think I've only worked with about 3 people who were utilizing this and had that kind of a backup system. And one of them I'm still working with, and she's doing quite well, but it took a very long time. And we need to understand John Zahorik, who created the mannequin system of anatomy, said in a workshop that Lansing and I went to in 1991, evolution keeps what works. So please recognize that some of these anomalous variations, they're there, but this is here whenever we might need it. So one of the unfortunate elements of a diabetic progression are amputations. And this involves the localized damage to both nerves and blood vessels, but it is correlated with systemic circulatory congestion. And I had a client come to me a couple of years ago who had had a double lung replacement. She was having 2.5 years of intractable pain in and along her medial tibia. This picture immediately came to mind, and I realized I was dealing with somebody who had the profile of chronic heart failure. And that is a specialty of mine in working with people, and I hope to work with hundreds and thousands before my time is up. Remarkably, her pain was reduced and almost extinguished within 3 sessions. So as we get better at all these things, and as you learn some of the elements of asymmetries within the vascular system and the neural system, you can get better and better at all this. Now, my son, who is a diabetic, asked me to include this, and he's absolutely correct. Adverse child experiences can be one of the tipping points. Other people have talked about what tips us into type 2 diabetes. Sometimes it's we jump over some of the adversities we've had as children, and many of us did: abuse, neglect, household dysfunctions, all different kinds. There are few people that leave their childhood without some feelings of hurt, wounding, violation, or just confusion. Sometimes it's massive. Lansing Gresham, in a book called The Body's Map of Consciousness, details that the liver is an organ where frustration builds, gallbladder where unfairness oftentimes resides, fairness and lack of fairness. Usually it's the unfairness that we remember, or the sense of shame that oftentimes may accompany being abused in one way, shape, or form. So, what can we do? We can assist people to just encourage to find a counselor or a therapist. And if you have done so yourself, please share this with your client. That's how we have influence because we're simply wanting their best outcome for themselves. Now, diabetic management plans are tough. It's for many, sticking to any plan is. And this is a book, You Are the Mountain Transforming Self Sabotage into Self Mastery by Brianna West. This is one of the best self help books I have ever read. So I've been recommending it to everybody, and please look into it yourself. The one element here that bypasses, we need to really hold this in the foreground. This is like the emergency room GI sections person. Help people, encourage them, swing those pom poms. Dallas cheerleaders. We're if people can do anything, encourage them to do that. And usually they'll repeat something that's enjoyable to them. Whether or not it's just walking their dog twice, maybe they can do it 3 times a day when the weather's not so hot. So I want to acknowledge Dr. Frank Netter. This is actually the original book that I bought in 1989 and the attending slides to it. As technology evolved, I was able to digitize them so that I can share Dr. Netter's wealth of anatomical knowledge. While I was at the Institute, I did meet a doctor who knew Dr. Netter. And I didn't know it until then that he was a West Palm Beach resident. And he had a particular number of cadavers that he would need to find in order for him to include one of the variations of the gallbladder, the pancreas, or the liver. So, takeaways from tonight. Please commit to becoming part of your client's early detection team. This is not just with diabetes, but it can be heart disease, it can be skin cancer. There are all kinds of things that we can notice. We're really good at observing things. And the partial blockage of the common bile duct, please consider how this does push people toward diabetes and or its ongoing difficulties. We can learn to assist to clear this duct. Please seek out training. I'm going to mention a few other people besides myself. Also, consider just the simple introduction to these ideas of equalizing the pressure, the importance of the Oreo cookie, and recognize that we can improve systemic circulation, which helps to facilitate diabetic management or a reversal if that's possible. It's wonderful to be part of a miracle. Again, just want you to conceive that our job is to enhance upward flow of venous lymphatic fluids while at the same time increasing the downward flow of bile and pancreatic juices. This is true for everybody, especially those managing diabetes. Scientific American suggests that actually cooperation between even the most disparate groups is one of the primary reasons that our species, Homo sapiens, actually made it through and to creating such an amazing world that we have. Today's world is in disarray in so many different ways, but this interpretation gives me hope for our collective future. Yes, indeed. To have hope is what we need right now. But another element needs to be spoken, and that is that our species would have been put on a threatened species list today, as now the paleoanthropology group is acknowledging that at least twice Homo sapiens fell below 1,000 mating pairs. And I have to wonder if this isn't another evolutionary echo that is reflected in the controversy over reproductive rights of women and the falling birth rates in developing countries. the specter of extinction oftentimes will push people in a subconscious way that they're not even aware of. So the courses that I teach, I really focus in on the neurovascular tree, how it's organized, and how we may influence its improved functioning. And there are other skill sets, those of working with ancient reflexes, biomechanics. Very few people really understand that. I was lucky to have studied with Dr. McDonald, and then the visceral mobilization and joint mobilization techniques. The next scheduled course will be September 21 and 2 in Lake Worth Beach, Florida, resolving low back dysfunction and pain. Then I'm going to be working with Anne Bramham, who is an extraordinary um, manual lymphatic drainage person, trained in Europe, and we're uh, colluding and connecting to create a course on the fluid connection, specifically the brain. That will be in October in Hot Springs, North Carolina. Please contact her. And allow me to remind you that Biotone's EduTalk library includes these two additional shows that I did with previously with Danielle. And again, let us thank Biotone and EZ for these elements. Here's a listing of all the courses. You can, of course, come back and look these over as you like. And here are other people and ways to contact them. I'll leave that up here because the next page is the end page with my contact information, but you may want to take a screenshot of this. Again, I can't emphasize Anne Bramham's teaching ability. The Baral Institute everywhere in the world. He's developed curriculums. He showed us, those of us who were in his early advance trainings, things about how to work with nerves and blood vessels individually, but he's created curriculums around these. And Lynn and Ann Teachworth, I had a chance to see them both on video and then again just recently, 2 weeks ago at the Florida State Convention. They are excellent teachers. Frank and Lori Lowen, they used to be on the West Coast. They have moved to Massachusetts. Hopefully, I have the correct information for them. And here is mine. So my webpage is actually languished. My wife has had a number of health challenges, and I haven't had the heart to shift that as yet. So please check my Facebook page for future courses. Danielle, any questions?
Hi, I keep double clicking my video. Let's see. Dale is awesome. Our community is lucky to have him teach. Thank you for your expertise, Michael Shea. And thank you, Dale, for sharing your fountain of knowledge, wisdom, and insights. Always so rich and beneficial. Thank you for your knowledge. A lot of thanks for this, Dale. I I'm not a therapist, as you know, nor do I have diabetes. But I was curious about the GI tract and again, how that plays a part. I mean, it was a lot of information for me to take in. And that's one of my questions. The other was in your video that you did the voiceover.
Okay.
That was moving down.
Yes.
So you were helping with
Moving the bile within the
moving.
common bile duct down and through the sphincter of Oddi, because
Oh,
pancreatic juices also go through that sphincter. So when you work with someone who has that partially occluded, it will feel more dense. And the soft milking action is what helps to facilitate that. And there are other techniques that I show people in the courses that can help. Going back to what you were alluding to, these three organs are essential to everybody's problems because this is what interferes with blood and lymph getting back to the heart and lungs so that you can make new blood. Science figured out over 100 years ago that the heart can only pump out what it gets back. So our job is really to be, you know, we're part electrician, part carpenter, part plumber, and but mostly compassionate presence and intelligent hands.
Um, yes, and on your intake forms when you're meeting a new client,
Okay.
are any of these questions there? I mean, how do you identify that you would need to work on these
I
issues?
do everything verbally. I don't believe in intake forms. That people forget too much, and I am astutely perceptive, and I will jump to what is really obvious in their posture and their carriage and how they speak to something, what I sense they're leaving out. Um, and I'm correct very, very often. It's a very high accuracy point, but it just helps people because they're coming to me usually because they've been to see everybody else. I'm usually the therapist of last resort after they've also seen doctors. Occasionally, I'll get somebody who doesn't want to see doctors ever at all. And then my role is different. I need to encourage them to utilize medicine for what it's good at. And so oftentimes people are further into a progression of a disease, and I need to help them understand that.
All right, thank you. And Wendy is asking, how is this different than John Barnes' myofascial release?
Way different. John Barnes does a really good job with myofascial work, but he's only providing you with, to my knowledge, he may have updated since I last took a class, but he's not including the ancient reflexes. He's not including the visceral elements of how that has a central linkage within the human structure. Um, and if you're not working with those other variables, you're not working with a full deck. I was trained by one of the first renegade Rolfers. And so I had all of that. And when I worked with Dr. McDonald, I added all the biomechanics. I understood joints. I taught it across the nation and Canada. But it wasn't until I involved the viscera that I really saw things shift. And it wasn't just the viscera, it was the fact that you could affect central circulation so much more quickly as a result. And that's why I spend the time trying to explain how the blood system really works, how we can assist that. And whereas it used to be, it'd take me 5 or 6 sessions to help somebody, now 1, 2, or 3 is much more common.
Very interesting. And the circulation plays a key role with diabetes as
It sure
well.
does. Oh, it is the essence of it. So, and we all must keep our humility. And that humility is that there are people that will come to us who are beyond our capacity to help because the progression has gone too far.
Oh,
And I usually don't have to say that, but I will refer them back to physicians and or to other allied health professionals, usually acupuncturists or PTs, for assistance.
all right. We had a chat come in. Can you explain what you mean by ancient reflexes?
Ancient reflexes have to do with us falling. The long and short of it is that our ancient ancestors started standing up and walking while still living in trees. And as a result, when they would fall, they would die. And this is part of the ancient reflexes biomechanics and the progressions of aging. Please look that up in the EduTalk library, and I go over that very specifically. But that's the short course.
Well, thank you. Now, Valerie is saying she's a certified lymphatic drainage massage therapist in Louisiana, and they have many diabetics
I'm
uh,
sure.
there. And
I would encourage her to reach out to Anne Bramham and see maybe if she has the qualifications to come to the October fluid connection, the brain course. She,
oh,
because that is an advanced course as
oh,
Anne has organized it.
all right. And let's see, Valerie is also asking, I have a patient who went to Sedona. John Barnes worked on them. they got massage 3 hours a day for a week or two. What's the difference from Rolfing to myofascial release?
Um, Ida put together what she believed to be an unwrapping the package. And I'm not sure how I even understood this, Danielle, and to the rest of you, but the two people that I interviewed before I entered the program, I could tell that their circulation was way improved. One gentleman was in his 40s. I'd never seen anybody at his age have the kind of juiciness, and the other gentleman was mid 30s. And same thing. But it took me almost 25 years to understand that what Rolfing and myofascial work do is they help to release the elements of the suspensory ligaments that relate to the organs and their functioning, and thereby that's what improves the circulatory effect.
All right. And then, oh, unwrapping, is that like unwinding?
In Ida's view of thinking, it was different. But they are different. I'll just say they're different concepts. Unwinding is a way to unravel traumatic events as they may have actually occurred. People do spin and flip, go upside down, all kinds of things, especially if they roll a car or they're hit by something or they fall off a roof. So people have so many bizarre accidents, and the unwinding process is sometimes the quickest way for them to calm their nervous system because they no longer have to experience the echo of that injury. It has been laid out before them. Then connective tissue work and working with the organs, the craniosacral system, anything and everything that you could learn at the Upledger Institute, please go there. It's one of the best learning places around. I am a product of them.
Well, thank you for that. Um, what I would like to do is thank you, first of all, for today's presentation. I would also like to mention that tomorrow, you check your inbox, and if you don't see a follow-up email from me in your inbox, please check spam or your junk folder. The day after every EduTalk, be it the EduTalk Massage Series or the EduTalk Diabetes Series, you receive a follow-up email, which includes the recording link, handouts from the presenter, their contact information, and Dale referenced quite a few additional sources for you to check out, including the Upledger Institute. And I will include these links in the follow-up email as well, and links to Dale's previous EduTalks that he did with us this year. Believe it or not, 2025 EduTalks are filling up, and Dale will be presenting again, as will Anne Bramhan, that was mentioned here today and is also on the sheet that we're seeing. So many great EduTalks coming up, which
And
are
let me interrupt you just for a second
okay.
and let people know that unfortunately the anatomical drawing that will be referenced in the second article did not come through. So I apologize for that, but you can just look up a picture of the liver and gallbladder and you'll be able to make sense of it.
All right, and Dale is referencing in the follow-up email the handouts that will be attached. Please keep an eye out for upcoming invitations to the EduTalk series. On August 20th, for Massage EduTalks, we have Tanya Rodriguez, and she will be presenting on implicit bias training, working with diverse populations. On September 10th, we'll have Carrie D'Ambrosia presenting on energetic balancing and introduction. And Carrie has presented previous EduTalks as well, which are also in the EduTalk library on biotone.com. On September 17th, The EduTalk Diabetes series will have Linda Lockett-Brown. She'll present on dietary supplements in diabetes, what works, what doesn't, and what's potentially harmful. So again, please keep an eye out for the invitations to future EduTalks, and please visit the EduTalk archive libraries. You can actually find both on biotone.com under the EduTalk tab, or on ease-z.com under the EduTalk tab. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please be safe. Dale, thank you so much for your presentations. And again, watch your inbox or check junk or spam if you don't see a follow-up email by tomorrow afternoon. Thank you for the work you do. Everyone, take care and be safe, and join us again. Good night.
Thank you all.